And now I want to introduce to you a fellow by the name of Richard Chalfont. Now, this gentleman is a prominent architect in the Wilmington area. He's designed many architectural structures throughout this area. His current project is called Superfine Lane, which is now under construction in the city of Wilmington. I want to welcome to our show Richard Chalfont. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Richard, you know, you're like an artist or a craftsman, and like an artist or craftsman, we can only judge your work by taking a look at it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you've done?
Well, Richard's Alley is one that most Wilmingtonians know. Hamilton
yes.
House, the Grand Tier restaurant and the Grand Opera House.
I see.
The parlors in the Opera House.
My gosh.
A number of private homes, which are not as well known, of course. There's one building that began as Continental Car on Pennsylvania Avenue, and
yes.
now I've lived long enough to see it go through a number of transformations, which I suppose is the mark of the artist, too.
Now, your present project is Superfine Lane. Why don't you tell us about that?
This is a living, it's really condominiums, but I don't see it as condominiums limited to that. It's really an environment in which people will live, eat, work to some degree. I hope they will enjoy themselves there enormously. It's right on the banks of the Brandywine. I'm convinced myself that the river at that point will be full of boats within 2 years.
Now, when you say on the banks of the Brandywine, why don't you tell the viewers specifically where on the banks of the Brandywine?
Market Street Bridge, where it crosses into Old Brandywine Village.
Mm-hmm. How'd you pick the name Superfine Lane?
Because these are historic mills, and they ground flour. Actually, the flour from the mills was used for Washington's army at Valley Forge. And the mills in the colonial period ground more superfine grade flour than any other in the United States, actually, the colonies at that time. So the name is partly history and partly just plain snobbery, because if you saw it when we started, there's nothing superfine about it at all.
Now, of course, it is a very historical area. What are you doing about preservation or upgrading of buildings in the area?
Well, we're building one all-new building, then we're rehabbing another for living units, and 4 buildings are the really historic buildings, one which goes back to 1770, will be put back pretty much the way they were, except their use is of our time, not at all slavish restoration for the sake of restoration. They happen to be very handsome buildings, particularly the closer we go back to the way they were when they were first built.
What about a historic museum on the grounds?
No, I'm not much on museums. I like living, breathing. I like the past married with the present. And my personal belief is that the past will survive as long as it has a use in the present and in the future.
Well, right now it's in the construction stage. Let's take a look right now and see what's happening on the building site.
All right. So far, I just see you on the building site.
Well, we'll see it in a second. There we go.
All right. This actually shows Wilmington as it was in 1979 when we first started the project. And if you compare that with the way Wilmington is today, you'll really be shocked at the growth in the skyline.
Now you would see the Waterworks Cafe directly in front of you, which is
that's right.
Across from the river from your project.
This is looking downstream, low tide. Doesn't look like much there, but it really is very beautiful and will be increasingly so, particularly when it has small boats in it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what else do you have on the premises there?
Well, I think the next slide will show some of the dig. This is what it's like to work right next to the Brandywine. The old walls on the extreme right were from a mill that burnt in 1933, and we've salvaged those so that we can use them. They'll actually load a boat ramp, put your boats in the water where they used to load flour and send it off by packet to England.
So it must present some unusual obstacles to building in such a site.
I don't know how the men stood it working over the winter, because they had to wait for the tide to go out, and it was colder than a blank anyway. So,
how'd you begin designing a project such as Superfine Lane?
Partly I have to keep bread on the table. That's how anybody does anything, I think. We had a successful project, Rockledge, and always when you begin a project, when it's firmly launched, my job is to look for another. And this was very timely, I think. It was a project that the city government felt they wanted done. At that time, the growth of the city and employment in the city was not the sure thing that it is now. We based it on the return to the city, which in my opinion is based on the disenchantment of the automobile. and it's really a question of economics.
Now, you're just more than an architect. You're handling all aspects of this whole project. And I understand in terms of sales, you had half the project sold before it was even started to be built.
We have a little bit better than half sold right now. And for us, a sale means that they have such confidence that they put down 10%. Their money must be available for use in the project.
I see.
And we discourage investors, although it's a well-known fact that a number of our units are exceptional investments. Now, there were people that have been with us for 3 years with 10% down. That really takes confidence, particularly because there was a period of about 9 months when we no longer really controlled the property. And we still have many of those people with us. Of course, they have benefited.
Now, why would anyone put down 10% on a project before it's even started?
Well, partly because that way they get a better price.
Okay.
Also, they get the advantage of customizing. And I think for all the people that have been with us for that period of time, and certainly all the people now, they believe, as we do, that this is a very exciting thing for the city. And it's a combination of wanting to live there and wanting to participate in something that is very exciting.
Now, you had mentioned before the show that glamour is important to you. Why is that?
Well, I think most people tend to flatten out in their lives. And we know now that we're all going to live longer. It used to be you could count on being out of the picture by the time you were 45. Now when you get to a certain situation, you want something more in life than just a humdrum routine, day in, day out. It was all right for 20 years, but for 40 it's a little much.
Now, Richard, I've heard tell that you just cater to the rich. Is that true?
No, not at all. My work usually looks that way. I'm flattered, but you'll find that it's competitive. It is professional. I think certainly many of the things I've done look very expensive. I don't think they are. I think the owners will vouch for that, and the fact that I've had a continuing, steady stream of clients in my role purely as architect. And one reason why so many people put their money on the drumhead in this project is because we have a great many people in Wilmington who have made a lot of money on things that they have purchased from us.
Briefly, what number might people call if they would be interested in getting more information?
Oh, easiest thing is just Chalfont in the telephone book under architect.
Chalfont in the telephone book under architect. This has been Richard Chalfont, the architect of Superfine Lane, a project that's going up, one of many projects that Richard Chalfont has been instrumental in. He's been a very important person in making Wilmington a beautiful city, which it has become, and I want to thank you very much, Richard Chalfont, for being on our show.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure.
And now we're going to go to some short messages, and then we'll be back with more of Focus Delaware. Stick around. I'm looking forward